Come on, you know the rules. If the Celtics win, the music gets to roll. The music gets to roll. Celtics go up 3-1. Guys, how's it going? Welcome back in to Celtics Talk Weekly Post Game Show. I am your host, Rob Ate, and joined with me are my two co-hosts, Xavier, aka the X-Man, and Zach, aka the Celtics fan page. Guys, we have Ian Angelo joining us shortly here as well. The Celtics beat the Miami Heat 102-88 on the road in Game 4 of the first round of the Eastern Conference NBA playoffs. Derek White led the way with 38, kind of backpack carrying the Celtics offensively and defensively here in Game 4. The Celtics going back to the TD Garden, looking to close this series out, guys. However, got some news. Kristaps Porzingis obviously leaving the game in that third quarter with a calf tightness injury, which is the report as kind of what we know now. We're going to get into that, guys. But before we dive deep into all of that, what are your initial thoughts, reactions, and takeaways for the Celtics win tonight?
Yeah, I'm not going to speculate on KP. I'm going to send my wishes. Hopefully he's okay. But just analyzing the game for what it was, I think White was spectacular. That left wing three, he is making it a ridiculous clip. That's his spot. He had feel for the offense all game. I think more than anyone else on the court, he kind of knew when to knife through the defense and just go in. A lot of times they were overplaying him from beyond the arc because he was so hot from there. So I feel like just all in all, he was awesome. And defensively, he had a few awesome blocks too. He was everywhere. And I think that's what we come to expect from Derek White. And I think throughout, I was trying to see how Tatum and Brown were going to play. They were a little disappointing to me personally. I like to see them try to get their stuff going. I think Tatum is a little bit too happy defaulting to that fadeaway jumper. I think I was expecting to see him more at that hammer position in the second half in the zone. He was there a little bit, but not as much as I was anticipating. And I think his driving has been rather lackluster, and he's settling too much. And I was talking to Rob before the show, and I think my biggest problem with the Celtics right now is they know they're so much better. Like, it's not even remotely close. This series is so uncompetitive, besides Miami shooting their best three-point percentage in franchise history for a game. And when that happens, this Celtics team has had a mountain of evidence to show that they don't really care. They'll get up by a certain amount, and then the foot just immediately comes off the gas. And I think Tatum and Brown are the biggest offenders of this, and we've seen it throughout the series. And to me, I want to see them in a closeout game view the importance of that as what it is, that you're going to get extra rest because you know Cleveland and Orlando at minimum is going 6, and I'd say many people are anticipating that to go 7. So give that extra time to heal. Give that extra time for Kristaps to heal specifically and take care of business because not only have they struggled against Miami in TD Garden, that should upset them, but they struggled kind of against everyone in the playoffs lately at home. And I feel like this entire season, what's been the mantra? Different here, different in Boston. And that's leaked into the team. And that's why their regular season record at home was like 37-4. And I think it's so important to view what these guys are doing right now as unacceptable and to change that. Because, look, they were always going to win this series and they were always going to do it swiftly. It's just a matter of building the necessary habits for down the line. And right now, I think some of the role players have done that. Holiday, White to an extent. Porzingis was doing a little bit better before his injury. Now it's time for Tatum and Brown to do so as well.
I'd also add, you mentioned the complacency thing, and I agree. It starts with Tatum. It starts with Tatum and Brown, and once they start getting complacent and shot chucking when they're up 22, then it kind of just like seeps into the rest of the starting line.
They're the barometer for everyone else.
It's just it's like you're up, God knows, 24 at one point, I think, and then it's 20, and then all of a sudden it's a 13-point game with 5 minutes remaining. The Heat crowd is back into it, and Joe's having to call a timeout to stop the momentum because they're on a 15-2 run over the last 4 minutes or whatever it is. But I guess it's one of those things when you're playing on the road in the playoffs. But I completely agree that that's certainly something. We talked about it before about how we give up so many big leads because we have so many big leads, and we've had a 25-point lead or whatever it is, and 3 out of these 4 games, and we've been able to close it out. But obviously, just being able to build those leads and then keep it at 25 or even increase it to 30 or 35 or something that obviously I think we'd all like to see. Obviously, a big game from Derek White, 38. Yeah, I mean, I think these last 2 games, our defense has just taken it to another level.
Right.
Specifically, I mean, after that game 2 loss, we're looking at, they're taking 15 to 20 wide open threes, and then we come back and everything's closed out. The Heat have, I think, 60 points after 3 quarters or whatever it was, maybe 70. And they've held them under 100 for the last 2 games, and hopefully that can continue forward. And my biggest thing at this point is just get out of this series without a season-ending injury to one of our star players. Please get to the next round as healthy as possible, get KP as much rest as he needs so he can be ready for either Orlando or Cleveland.
Right.
Ian, how are you feeling, man? You came in with all the energy. I got to hear it.
I am feeling amazing, Rob. Thank you for asking. That was a Derek White masterclass. I know Lionel Messi was there, but Derek White was the greatest athlete in the world tonight. Yeah, that was an amazing performance by D White. I mean, 38 points, playoff career high, 8 threes. I mean, I don't know, man. He from the word go, he was literally our offense throughout the entire first half. He carried this team, kicking and screaming, whether they wanted to win this game or not. He made sure that the Celtics won this game. Overall, and obviously the Porzingis injury sucks right now. We don't know exactly what's going on with that, but I don't know, man. This was an all-time performance by D White.
Well, I mean, he was the heart and soul. He's your player of the game. We can get that out of the way real quick. I mean, it was no question. After the first quarter, I got to make this graphic and sit on it until the final points were, you just it's kind of new. This was the Derek White game. He loves playing in Miami, and he was awesome tonight. I mean, really doing everything for the Celtics. 38 points, 4 rebounds, 3 blocks, 8 threes, like you said, Ian. I mean, shooting over 50% from behind the arc. It was a phenomenal game from Derek White. For this, as the Celtics go and how the series is turning out, I'm really not too surprised. I fully expect to beat the Miami Heat. I thought it was going to be 4 once I heard Jimmy was out. With Jimmy, I still think it would have been 5. With the evidence that I can see, it probably would have been 6 with Jimmy Butler. However, I don't know how much of a real measurement of these games are for what the Celtics will look like in the rest of the playoffs. I think these games are so out of the ordinary, and no other team in the league presents this dynamic that the Heat present with the Celtics. It feels like we're watching 80s basketball and 90s basketball with how the Miami Heat are playing, and I don't think you see that against any other team in the league. So I don't know if it's me giving them the benefit of the doubt, but I really like what I saw from Boston in games 1, 3, and 4. The lead blowing, for me in the playoffs, it almost feels like when you have a big lead, you should expect the other team to kind of poke at it and come back. You saw obviously what Dallas did last night or yesterday against the Clippers, and I think that's kind of what the playoffs are all about. Is a team is not going to let you just walk away. So I think Boston tonight did a great job of not letting that lead go under 10. And I think that's really how your mindset should be when a team is mounting a comeback, is once it gets to 14 and 15, obviously you want to have that mindset of extend the lead back throughout the whole run, but to really, really focus when the lead gets to like 15. And I'm going to give a lot of credit to Joe Mazzulla tonight, because the guy was using his timeouts. And I mean, I think this might be like a career high for Joe Maz, 3 timeouts in like 4 or 5 game time minutes. Like the guy was on a roll, on an absolute heater, and I was here for it. And it showed, because the 3 minutes left in the game, Celtics were up by like 15. Joe Maz timeout, Celtics extend the lead to 19. So like, the progressions and signs of improvement from Boston, obviously, a positive. I just don't think this series is like it doesn't feel real to me. It feels like the Celtics just have to get past this for the real games to begin, because it feels like Miami is just plays this brand of basketball that you're not going to see anywhere else. And I'm honestly, quite frankly, so over it. But I do want to talk about Kristaps because it feels like it's the headline.
That's actually a good transition because we just got word that he left the arena in a walking boot.
So he will undergo further evaluation, further testings, scans, images, pictures tomorrow, which is Tuesday. Expect Kristaps to be sidelined for the rest of the series, no doubt, no matter how long it goes. I think my best, prediction on this injury, and Ian, you texted this to us, which is actually great knowledge to have. So Kristaps has had similar injuries to the calf twice this season. One in which he missed 5 games. The second time he missed 8 games. So obviously those are regular season numbers. Depending on what the grade is, guys, I feel like we could expect Kristaps to probably find himself at the minimum out until like game 4 of the second round. I think that is kind of like the pinpoint of to expect the talks of Kristaps coming back. However, the show goes on without Kristaps Porzingis, whether he's on the court or he's not. So what does this Kristaps injury, how does it affect Boston? And do you guys think that this is a big enough blow to potentially hinder the Celtics' finals appearance?
Well, I hate to do this in this moment, but I told you so. And what I mean by this is I've been preaching all season long that you have to integrate the other big men better. And Joe Mazzulla did a poor job of doing that. And I think we're about to see the payoff of that very shortly. And perhaps I'll be wrong and it'll look totally fine. But you go out and get Xavier, incredible last year in the playoffs. He absolutely shut off the water for Anthony Davis when Memphis played Los Angeles. And I think Tillman is a very good big in a rotation. I don't think he can be your main guy right now. I think he can develop into that. But I think as a series goes along, he's a guy I'd want to see on the court. His defensive instincts are incredible. He's a decent rebounder. His offensive game is serviceable enough around the basket. And I thought getting him was truly a gift. And the fact they haven't used him as much as I feel like they should have, to me, was a mistake. Cornette dropped out of the rotation for a large chunk of the end of the season. And I think now you're going to see those guys have to play a lot, along with Al Horford, who is, 38 years old? And you're not going to be able to over-rely on him either. And Neemias Queta is another guy you can play, but he hasn't been with the actual Boston Celtics playing considerable minutes for months at this point. So I think the options are there. I think the talent is there. I just feel like Kristaps Porzingis had an injury history, and Al Horford is old and has a lot of miles on him. So why didn't you prep for this better? And that's the part that upsets me. But I think no matter what, they can get through the end of this series. They can get through either Orlando or Cleveland. I think Cleveland would definitely be a little bit of a challenge, especially with Allen and Mobley. But I still think they'd be able to space Cleveland out, and it wouldn't matter as much, especially with the pure talent discrepancy. But it's one of those things that you had to have at least thought this was a possibility. And I think the prep for this just wasn't serviceable enough. And hopefully it's nothing too serious. And hopefully they just keep him out as long as possible, as long as the team doesn't need him, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's one of those things I think they could have prepped for a little bit better.
I think the thing that bothers me is the way they handled KP in the game. Like you mentioned, he has a leg injury history. It's a right calf, I think, this time instead of left calf, which it was during the year. But either way, he turns his ankle, starts limping. And in my head, I'm like, all right, we're up 17. Take him out. Then he goes down, and he does something weird with his back on a defensive rebound. And still, I'm saying, take him out. Someone called timeout, and then he goes down the court and non-contact injury. And
he put his hand up to get out too before the last play. So he was calling.
It's like if you're, I just don't think that was handled well by KP, the coaching staff, team doctors, whoever it was. I mean, I don't understand why there's a need to run a risk with him injuring himself further from a twisted ankle or whatever he did to his back on the defensive rebound in a 17-point game with 3 minutes left at halftime. I mean, that's me. And then looking at the rest of the playoffs, they're not going to lose to Orlando or Cleveland because of Kristaps Porzingis. That's not going to be the reason. I think we can all agree that they have enough talent to get past that. But the biggest thing I think is having to play Al Horford, who we just mentioned is 37 or 38, having to play him considerable minutes now is going to be a problem later because he is old and we need him to be fresh for New York, if it's New York or, whoever it is, Denver. And it's like, okay, we need to throw bodies at Jokic. And Al Horford's playing 35, 40 minutes a night in the second round. How is that going to affect his ability to be on the floor efficiently in the conference finals and ultimately, hopefully, the NBA finals? So I think that's a big thing that we just have to watch out for is how fresh can we keep Al Horford while also managing this whole new big situation that we've now found ourselves in.
Yeah, I mean, there were times during the season, like we said earlier, he missed 7 games earlier this year in November, December. I think it was with a left. It was something with his ankle, I think. Hamstring or ankle, one of the two. Mm-hmm. And then he missed 8 games in March and April with a hamstring injury. Worst case scenario, if this is not as bad as we think it is, I say he probably misses the entire second round. And for an Eastern Conference Finals, I'd say he's probably back by then, depending on how it goes. But this sucks. It really does suck because a lot of their game is predicated around Porzingis and how good he is. You don't really have much of a shot blocking, force right now either. I mean, Al is great, but like you said, I mean, he's 38 years old. He's not, he's not 7'3" like Porzingis is. Like Luke Cornett has the size, but I mean, we know for a fact Luke Cornett is not Kristaps Porzingis. And I mean, like you said, I like Xavier Tillman. I don't really know why we haven't used him at all. I feel like that's kind of, honestly, maybe they were waiting to use him in a series against Cleveland where there are double bigs and he can bang down low with them. Like maybe that's why, because Miami plays a little too weird to really have Tillman out there all the time. So I guess maybe that's what we're going with. But I don't really know. It sucks. I really hope the best case scenario for Porzingis is, he's not seriously injured and he's at least back by the Eastern Conference Finals. Hopefully, that's all I'm hoping for at this point.
I don't think this Kristaps injury impacts the Celtics' chances of getting to the finals at all, because of how weak and terrible and god awful this Eastern Conference is.
No, that's true. Getting to the finals won't be the problem, I don't think.
Right. It's the stuff that happens once you're in the finals if you get there, which they should. I think the matchup wise, you want to talk about the rest of the series. Kristaps honestly is a terrible matchup against Miami. I honestly think it's a positive with him off the floor. If you want my honest opinion, I think Al Horford, fresh leg Al, presents a much better defensive matchup against Bam with the size and the speed. And I think offensively, the Boston is going to steer away from this Kristaps Porzingis, bail us out, please, force you the ball mentality that you kind of saw there in games 2 and early on in game 4 tonight. So again, you don't want to see KP down, and it sucks, and it's going to make life harder on the Celtics, but I don't think it changes their trajectory, significantly within the Eastern Conference. But again, like Zach said, something you got to worry about now is, how much are you really going to be able to lean on Al Horford and not regret it come late May, early June if you're playing then? Because we saw what happened last year. And I don't know. So for me, I don't know. Ian, you got something for me?
Yeah. So the typical time of healing for calf strains, if it's a grade 1, then he'll be out for 1 to 2 weeks. Grade 2, he'll be out 3 to 6 weeks. And if it's a grade 3, he's done for the playoffs. So,
I mean, we'll see.
Hope for grade 1. Let's hope
so
for
every
1.
possibility is in play.
Every possibility is in play, and none have been ruled out. Honestly, we don't even know if it's an Achilles injury. Woj said that, there's a really good chance it's not, but you never know what the imaging is going to say. So, but, I remember when that Gordon Hayward injury first happened, they said it was, an ankle sprain or something, or,
But he broke
was
his
like-
ankle?
I mean, it was pretty
I swear to God,
apparent he was toast.
the first injury, it was like right ankle sprain. The first
His leg
injury
was
that came out.
twisted like 90
I think-
degrees.
It was like
I
the
think the
initial
big
injury that
problem
they went
is-
out with, though. It's like something like
Yeah.
that. So it could be. I'm hoping it's not like right calf.
You know,
strain,
Ian's in a
like,
rough
a
mental
tear.
state if he's bringing up the Hayward injury. You know, my
I-
guys.
Right.
I'm not running on a whole lot of sleep right now. So,
I don't think I ever thought his ankle was sprained. I mean,
but no, I just remember when they first like when it.
No, I
first
remember that
happened,
too.
really?
I remember
when
that too.
he was out for the
The
game.
commentator screamed, "Gordon Hayward has."
Well,
broken his
I
leg."
remember they
I
downplayed
know.
it on the injury
But they
report.
completely. I might be getting the wording wrong, but I know they completely downplayed it the first time, like calling him out. But we all knew it was worse. than
I
that,
just think
but-
that's like the medical terminology, though. I think
Maybe.
that's where like the discrepancy between like Twitter doctors and actual doctors comes into play. That's all.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
I don't
so-
know. I think, but yeah, pretty much all we're hoping for is that he's only out for 1 to 2 weeks.
Right. And I think that something that I noticed with my naked eye, I'm no doctor, right? I got nothing, right? But eye test, there was no calf movement, which is a good sign if you're talking Achilles. Usually you can see something pop or move, or there's some, discomfort. Also, there was no grabbing at anything. Which I think is a very, very good sign. If you go back and you look at Durant and you look at Kobe and all these unfortunate Achilles injuries, their first instinct is to grab at it because it's popped, it's uncomfortable, it doesn't feel right, whatever the case may be. So I do think that that's an optimistic sign. I think just right now it's what's the severity of the calf injury? Is it are you going to be able to get Kristaps back? And if you're going to get him back, is he going to be 100%? Is he going to be healthy to go? Because I think that's when you run into the real problem is if Kristaps is on the floor and he's not 100% and you got the Denver Nuggets, you just never know. So I think that right now the Celtics, this is a test for them. They need to close out game 5, like more than ever. We have seen them before let series play on too long and let other teams extend series. You currently have your X factor on the injury report, needing as much time just in case as possible. You need to close this series out with the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Orlando Magic potentially playing in 7 games, right? The very least they're playing 6. So you figure you at least get like 4 extra days if you win game 5 at the bare minimum. But with that series looking like it's going to head towards 7, guys, how important is this game 5 for the Celtics? Because to me, it is as important as it gets. Like this is a must-win game.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with that. I think also the key is what we've seen defensively in game 3 and 4 and bringing that over into game 5. I think the main thing that was missing last year was the defensive intensity that we watched in 2022. Just even looking at the first round series with Brooklyn, I think that was some of the best playoff defense I've seen the Celtics ever play. But just so bringing that intensity that we saw these last 2 games in Miami, bringing it back to Boston. And I think Miami, I don't want to play Miami just because somehow all of our best players end up getting hurt whenever we play Miami. But they do bring out the intensity and the need to actually play defense that I think that they can look at the way they've played over the last 2 games on the defensive end and say, okay, if we want to win a title, this is what our defense needs to look like for the rest of the playoffs. Where if you look back to last year when they played Atlanta, just like whatever. I mean, you let Trae Young walk into your crib and hit a 3-pointer to push it to 6 games, and the defense just wasn't there that whole series. And I think that carried over throughout the playoffs, especially in that Philly series, and then ultimately into that Miami series. So hopefully this year they'll see the defensive intensity that they brought in round 1, and that'll carry over through the rest of the postseason.
I think for me, something to look at is I understand when you say like it's reminiscent of 80s and 90s basketball. It's just reminiscent of a team that has way less talent and knows their only chance is to be scrappy and to just dive for every loose ball, step on every ankle, do whatever you can. And I understand the mentality. I do, because that's how you win games sometimes. And if I'm Boston, I need to understand that their intensity is always going to be at 100 and that they're going to claw and fight till the bitter end They can be down 35 or they can be down 2. They're going to keep playing with the same level of intensity. It's a good learning lesson for Boston, by the way. They should maybe, take some notes on that. But anyway, I think it's one of those things that, yes, it's must win because it's a closeout game, but it's also a must win because just admonish your demons. Just extinguish them. Just get rid of them. Bye-bye Miami. Get over this hurdle that you've had in prior playoffs. Even when they made the finals and won in 7 against Miami, that Jimmy Butler shot was like an inch away from going in, and that was almost an epic collapse. And that should have never been as close as that was. So just get rid of this kind of chapter of your story and move on. And I think with that weight off their shoulders, I was a little concerned at the beginning of the year when we were talking about this, the potential Miami matchup, where if they beat Miami, they'd feel too accomplished. I don't feel that anymore because watching this team, there's clearly still this mental hurdle they have looking at Spo, looking at Bam, looking at Hero, that if they're able to get over that, I feel much more confident going forward with this group.
I'd also say, to your point about like the way that the Heat play, I think the Celtics after Game 2 have done a really good job of bringing like scrappiness and that sort of like dog mentality, like the way Horford even responded to Bam going under Tatum today. He got in there and pushed him around. Same thing with the Hauser situation in Game 3. So I think that sort of mentality that the Heat obviously do bring out in the Celtics will hopefully carry forward as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to underestimate any other team in the Eastern Conference, but is it bad to say that this is going to be their hardest series right now? Like, just from a
physicality
physically, mentally, history-wise, this is going to be the Celtics' hardest series, no matter what. And I'm not going to say every other series from here isn't going to be, Oh, Xavier, what's up?
We have a Kristaps Porzingis tweet. Good W tonight. D White is special. Thanks for all the support. We'll be good. Flexing emoji.
All right.
But yeah, like I said, this will be probably the hardest series the Celtics play, unless they end up playing the Knicks in the Eastern Conference Finals, which they probably will at this point. But yeah, honestly, like you said, expel the demons. Just end it. Don't give them any other reason to even like be around. Like, I don't know. Have them, how they like booked the flight to Boston the day before the play-in or like the day on the playing game. Have them book the flights to Cancun the day before Game 5.
Well, I so agree with that. Because I think from like Spoelstra, first of all, is a different breed. He's in a tier of his own in terms of what he can do as a coach. And then I think there's this, like you guys said, this mental battle that Boston has when they see Miami, they see Bam, they see Hero being in that, although they love being in that building, right? But it's just like, if you put all of that into a vacuum and you see it, it's like probably from a game-to-game mental, physical, like it's probably going to be the hardest matchup they have in the East, right? Because you got Cleveland, who might win an extra game, right? But the game isn't going to be harder against Cleveland. And then you got New York, who, quite frankly, New York's a bunch of dogs, right? But I don't know if New York has that extra X factor for me, right? Like, yeah, you got Brunson, but what else you got, right? You're playing the Boston Celtics. You're going to need something else. I don't think they have that. So I really agree with that take because I think for game to game, yeah, we might beat them in 5, but it's going to be it's like Brooklyn was like a really hard 4-game sweep, but you know what I'm saying? So, but we need to mention something. I got to bring this up. Can we talk about Stan Van Gundy tonight? I mean,
you know what?
My God.
Shout out to, oh crap. Noah, I'm trying to find her name.
Noah Dazzle?
Noah Dazzle. She dropped the 5-minute diatribe that Stan Van Gundy went on about Jason Tatum. So
I mean,
if you want to watch,
tripping, right? Like, that was nuts.
I was lucky enough to be able to watch NBC Sports Boston, so I didn't actually see what he was saying, but I found a quote that I think is.
I could probably tell you just off the top of my head what he was saying.
So this quote says, "The flagrant foul on Bam Adebayo was Jason Tatum's fault. Bam was just contesting a shot after the whistle." That's what Stan Van Gundy
And they started bringing up Joe Mazzulla contesting the shot, and they started Tatum's on the ground holding his ankle in pain, and they start talking about how cool his shoes look. And I mean, it was just a disaster class of commentating. And I'll give my credit over my friend because he was sitting on the couch, does some research. Turns out Van Gundy was a head coach of the Miami Heat for 3 years. So we got a Doris, you know what I'm saying?
Also, he has a career record of 19-21 against the Celtics, by the way.
Yeah. So I mean that was awful. I mean, I'll tell you, I usually love listening to the national broadcast, Mike Breen and Ian Eagle, right? I like what they have to offer. But I mean, you add these side pieces in, right? Like Doris Burke and sometimes even Reggie Miller and Greg Anthony and now Stan Van Gundy. I mean, they're just terrible sometimes. And oh my God, that was the worst thing I've ever listened to in my life. It was awful.
I'm not going to defend him, but I want to talk about it with greater context. So for much of this game, Stan was upset with the Celtics approach, and he voiced that pretty clearly. Even when they were up 28 or whatever, he was still complaining about their overall intensity. I think his general gist of what he was trying to say was accurate, because I was also upset with the Celtics' effort for a lot of this game. And I thought their offense sucked. I think the ball movement was terrible for much of this game. I thought it was lazy. A lot of what the Celtics were doing felt predetermined. And like they were like, okay, I'm going to pass to the wing, but I know I'm going to get it right back. But I'm just doing this to do it and not have any intention. So I think with that in mind, I think his overall kind of sentiment had value. I think where you lose me is when you say something like this. I'm a bit biased here because I'm not like the Celtics approach this entire game, but I don't think that was a flagrant on Bam. So when you're admitting that one thing is clouding your judgment on another, that's where you lose me. Stan's brother is a consultant for the Celtics. I don't think he has like this deep hatred for Boston. Obviously, he coached other teams, including Miami and including Orlando, who had plenty of battles with the Celtics at the turn of the 2010s. But I think for me is the way you articulate your arguments, and I think Stan was just having word vomit, and it came off really poorly. And on that specific play, I think you can fix it in 5 seconds. Don't let players shoot after the whistle. Just outlaw it. You'll never have that play ever happen again. I understand why Bam was frustrated. I understand why he tried to block the shot, but you can't be that physical about it either. There's two sides, and I think Tatum maybe shouldn't have done that, and I think Bam shouldn't have done it either. Both can be true, right? And I think to just act like it was totally one guy's fault and quote 90s basketball as if that was allowed in the 90s either was kind of silly. I think we have this kind of fantasized kind of dream of what the 90s basketball was, and it really wasn't. And
these damn kids are too soft these days.
Yeah, it's like these guys of a certain vintage kind of have this perception of what it was like. And KG, for one, popularized this notion of, you absolutely can't shoot after the whistle. He'd like climb the rim and swat shots. So, yeah, I just think it's one of those things that both guys were wrong. Just absolute word vomit.
I'm sorry,
everything was so weird about that.
You cannot blame Jason Tatum for getting a shot up. There's no world where that's
you can't blame the guy for trying to block.
If I'm being 100% honest, I don't even blame Bam for going to contest it.
Yeah,
that's normally what you do. Like that happens. That happens a bunch of times throughout a basketball game.
Right.
And like Tatum and Bam are like best friends off the court. So like obviously I don't think Bam was trying to hurt Tatum in any way, but I don't know, man. It was
it's just like for me, not an unbiased aside, right? Because I watched the game, like flagrant two, right? I just want Bam out of the game, right? But like all biased aside, like basketball fan, right? Like really like watching the play, it's like, okay, listen, Tatum took a shot. The rule says you can do that. Bam tried to contest. Rule says you can do that. Bam got a little too aggressive, got into Tatum's space, and landed under him. Dangerous play, not a basketball play. Flagrant one. On to the next thing. That's all it should have been, right?
The notion that like just because the ball is dead makes it not a flagrant is not how it works.
It's
like
ridiculous.
If the ball is dead and I punch you in the face,
that was crazy.
Not a flagrant because the ball is dead.
Right.
That's not how it works.
And honestly, like I think that you should be penalized a little bit more if the ball is dead. The ball's dead, right? Like I get it. Like Bam can contest the shot by putting a hand up. You don't got to get into Tatum's face. So, personally, maybe I'm biased and don't think, I don't see a problem in Jason Tatum taking a shot after the buzzer. I do see a problem with Bam getting a little too aggressive. I don't see a problem with him contesting it, but you got to know, like, listen, man, like, I get it. It's heated moment. Stuff happens. But my problem really was with what Van Gundy was saying. I mean, that was just one of the worst, other than the Doris Burke game 4 against the Sixers last year, which was just god awful. But Van Gundy tonight, this was one of the worst. I mean, that was fireable in my opinion. I mean, that was that bad.
Also, shout out Al Horford for bumping Bam out of the way. I know we were saying it's not personal, they're best friends, yada yada, but like Al, he's not gonna let it. Celtics are not gonna let you punk them this year.
Right. And can we talk about something? Do you guys remember after game 2 when I said at what point do you just run through one of those screens and sit them down? Tatum did it. That was
exactly what I thought. That was exactly
right. And I was like, hell yeah, man. Like at what you could tell he just got frustrated. Screw this, just ran through the screen. So it's like, that type of physicality, that fight back, Horford getting into Bam's face, Brown getting into Caleb's face. JT's been the common target here, which is not doesn't I don't like saying that, but it's like that's the stuff you want to see. That's the stuff that Miami gets that, and Boston feeds off that. So I mean, Van Gundy though, F. We've been a big grades guy recently. We've been giving a lot of grades out over here. You get an F, and I'm flunking you and I'm expelling you because you were that bad. That was terrible. I award
you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
0 golden stars for Stan Van Gundy.
I think when you're a color guy, you have to be able to articulate your points better. I think that's what it comes down to, because you have to add value to the game. And what he was doing, I think it was less about like this hatred for Boston and more about stylistically what they were doing. And that's fine. He's a coach. He should have those kind of feelings. But you can't let it overtake what's happening on the court. And I think that was his biggest offense tonight. Was it felt like after a triple, it was like, well, Boston was a little slow in that set. Didn't love how they came out of it.
And you know what?
As much as some of that was true, you can't do it every single time.
But it's mind-boggling. We're gonna bring that word back, Ian. We haven't heard that one in a minute. Mind-boggling to me that the Celtics can be up by 20, right? The Miami Heat have 74 points with like 4 minutes left to go in the game. And he's out here saying the Celtics were doing nothing correct on defense. The Celtics had a lousy defensive game. It's like, so you really think that Miami's just out here taking wide open jump shots, which we've seen what can happen when Miami gets open. And you think that they're just missing? If you like, Boston was causing disruption. They were closing out. They were doing the proper things. Sure, not to the highest level that we saw in game 3. Was it dimmed down a little bit? Sure, yeah. But I mean, Stan Van Gundy was sitting there saying Boston was doing nothing right, as if Boston was up 2 in a close game with Miami shooting 30%. Boston was up 20, and Stan Van Gundy was coming at the Boston Celtics. I mean, it was just atrocious.
I also think just among like national media, we've seen it all year where the bar is just so high for this team that they'll lose a game. Like we lost the game 2 loss. I mean, I thought people were saying our season was over. We lost game 2, and we had Bill Simmons saying that we would never beat Denver because we lost a game, and then Denver loses a game to the Lakers.
That was Kevin O'Connor, but yeah.
Oh, Kevin O'Connor.
And no, Simmons also said it in Simmons' podcast.
I mean, it's everybody.
More than one. Yeah, more than one.
I'm surprised we didn't get like a Kendrick Perkins think piece about how Joe Mazzulla needs to like.
No, remember he made a whole video, but we didn't want to watch it because it was like 4 minutes long.
Oh yeah, well yeah. I mean, it's just every single like they'll rattle off 14 wins in a row, and then they'll lose to like by like 5 points or 10 points or whatever it was, and then the world is ending, and we need to trade everybody and fire Mazzulla.
Yeah,
so I think the bar is ridiculous that if the Celtics are up 24 and then all of a sudden they're up 13, we are like the worst team ever. So.
Well, and that was like kind of the weird part about game 2. Once we kind of like got down to the thick of it, it was like, okay, does this loss is it irritating? Is it frustrating? Yeah, like no doubt. Right. But if you looked at the numbers, you're like, all right, how much of this is sustainable, and what percentage of what they did is sustainable? Not even like 60% of what Miami did that night was sustainable basketball. So it's like you have all these guys, right? Oh my God! You know what? I'm going to give Charles Barkley a huge shout out on this one because he, I think, was the only guy in the national media that was actually like, no, Miami can't do this. Miami just got hot. It's the NBA. That happens sometimes, right? Where if you're like, yes, was Boston's defensive effort lackluster? 100%. Were they clearly frustrated? 100%. Offensively, were they letting Miami disrupt them? 100%. But if you really look at what happened, that's an outlier game. That's a game that's up here, right? And you know, so it's just like, to me, this whole series against Miami, I don't care how they look necessarily, just if they're winning. And obviously you don't want to blow leads and play lousy. I mean that too, with minute details. But I mean, tonight I was very pleased. You beat them by 20. You're defensively doing exactly what you need to do. Miami poses no real offensive threat, and you're taking care of that. So, you know, my whole thing, I'm feeling like Bill Belichick recently, guys. It's just I'm done with game 4. I'm on to game 5. That's how you got to be in the playoffs, because if you let a game 2 loss affect your game 3, you're not winning the championship. And I'm going to give credit. Celtics tonight, right? Celtics 2 nights ago, they bounced back and responded after game 2 with a game 3 win. And then tonight they took the blueprints from game 2 or from game 3 and they applied it to game 4 and they got the win. So, you know, game 5, what are you guys expecting? What do you guys got?
Win. Just win. Just don't troll. Don't pull any of the things that you did last year in game 5. Just end the series on your home court and get as much rest as you can.
Yeah, I agree. Just win.
Nailed it.
and I think going back to the media perception thing, you're not going to get credit until you make the finals. You have to realize that if you're this team. And is it fair? No. But I think the last 2 years, there's almost been an unfair expectation because of how great this team has looked at its apex, that is always sustainable. And that's not basketball. You can't always play your absolute best every second of every game. And I think the reason why people are so bullish on Denver is because their execution last year was so flawless for much of that postseason run that they think they can replicate it. And Denver this year, it's only been 4 games, has not looked nearly as bulletproof. And I understand why people are defaulting to that. But I think they also have specific problems. I think Murray is hobbled, and that's a big deal. I think MPJ is playing amazing, and they're still trailing for 71% of the series. Jokic has been great.
They're losing right now, too.
Yes.
Lakers are up 41-37.
And the depth hasn't been when it was. So when I hear people say that Denver would beat Boston, I understand it. And to a large extent, I agreed with it if it's Denver from last season. But I don't think that's what you're getting. And I think people really need to wake up to that. Because I think people judge Boston too much on their lows and not on their consistent product. And look, 22, you were way ahead of schedule. We've done this exercise. And last year, you probably should have won. And no one's going to argue that. But that's still better than 98% of the rest of the NBA. This is the year. This is the culmination. So, yes, if you don't make it this year, you can say playoff chokers. You can do that whole dance, the fraud alert, whatever. But I think it's unfair right now. And you're seeing that play out in this series that, yes, Miami is without Butler, but this is still so easy for Boston. It's ridiculous. It's not supposed to be this easy. I don't care who's on the other team. It's still the NBA playoffs. You still have Euro. You still have Bam. You still have Jaquez. Yes, he's a rookie, but he's still uber talented. It's not supposed to be like this, and I think people are too accustomed to Boston looking so good because they're trying to poke holes in them every chance they get and not appreciating how special they actually are.
And I know we have to close out the show, but I do want to touch on the Denver thing. I've said this before. It's the current day and age that we're in. You run it back to 2021, man. That upcoming year, what was the narrative? Giannis is the hands-down best player in the world. The Bucks are unbeatable. The Bucks are the next dynasty. They're the next royalty. The truth is that right now, NBA media is looking for their new guy. Right? You have LeBron fizzling out. You have Curry fizzling out. You have Durant fizzling out. The NBA is trying so hard to latch on and find their new it player, right? And the truth of the matter is that we're in an era that you're probably not going to get just one guy running the league. The talent dispersity in the NBA is at an all-time high. The teams are so good, and you're really probably, odds are, I know what I said about Boston earlier in my earlier statement and quote that is on the Celtics Talk Weekly Instagram, but your odds are you're probably not going to get many more dynasties for the next decade. The league's just too good. So for me, I look at Denver. They look beatable. They look absolutely vulnerable. I don't think they're going to get back to the finals. I don't think Nikola Jokic is this hands down best player and on another tier in Larry Bird, Magic Johnson status. That's not true. That is 100% media narrative being driven. And, but again, we're on to game 5. We're on to game 5.
Right.
I'm focused on it.
2 things I want to say to close out the show. First thing, it's pretty much going off of what you guys are saying. The Boston Celtics have so much pressure on them that them winning games by listen to the amount of points that they have let the Miami Heat score in these games so far. 94 in game 1, 111 in game 2, 84 in game 3, 88 in game 4. And these are bad games for the Celtics from what people are saying. The Celtics are beating the Miami Heat by 20 points and are still being labeled as a bad team. Because they're not a bad team, but they're underperforming because
Right.
Media narrative and whatever. And also, to end on a positive note, Derek White's post-game interview, they asked, what's Derek White's advice to young hoopers? He said, believe in yourself, never stop working, and when you're on this court, you have to be the hardest working player on the court. So, shout out D. White.
The D. White legacy game.
I'll go back to the Denver thing, I guess. And I mean, we can talk about them being a dynasty and Jokic and everything like that, but realistically, they have a really tall task once they get to the second round. Minnesota I think they've looked like the best team so far this playoffs. They took care of the Suns pretty easily. Anthony Edwards has just been on a different level. So before we can talk about a Celtics Nuggets NBA Finals, they have to go into Minnesota and try to not go down 0-2.
And
I think for me, Rob,
also the Thunder just swept the Pelicans.
Yeah.
I want to. Denver has home court. I forgot. They're the 2 seed, so it should be. Yeah. It's a tall task either way.
Yeah. The only thing I want to say before we close out is this team has all the tools. They just have to figure it out. And I think so far they've done a good job of toying around and figuring out what works and what doesn't. But the intensity needs to pick up, and I expect it to in Game 5 on Wednesday.
Well, JB,
shout out Drew Holiday for having a solid game tonight.
Hell yeah! And JB said it. They feel that this team has another gear, another level to unlock. So again, guys, the Celtics, they took care of business. Whether you like it or not, they got the win. 102-88 in Miami. They sweep the 2-game little mini series within the series in Miami. They take them both. Game 5 is on Wednesday, May 1st, 7:30 tip off on TNT. After that game is over, guys, you know the drill. Come right back here. Come watch us talk about the game. I'm Rob. Below me is the X-Man. To the below right of me, that was my man Ian. And then right next to me is my man Zach, aka the Celtics fan page, guys. So again, until next time, you know the drill, guys. Go Celtics.